Hi, as Abby mentioned, my name is Rhiannon and I'm really excited to share with you tonight the story of Travltalk and how we got here. Some of you may or may not know that Travltalk is a React Native app and it's my baby really. It's an interesting thing to describe something as your baby, and actually I stopped describing it as my baby about a year ago because it became a company and a lot of people started working for me, and over the time since I had this idea I raised £650,000 myself from strangers, not family or friends. Friends came in a little bit at the end, but over the time since I first had the idea, which started back in 2015, there's been about 80 different people that I've managed and have worked through Travltalk. Not just developers, obviously, it's a company, so it's quite a big, lots of stuff going on, but just give you a bit of a background, who I am, what I did, why I thought actually I could wake up one day and take an idea from my bedroom to a mobile application. So I actually studied law and commerce at uni, and then I went traveling for 3 years, backpacking non-stop, and that was pretty cool. It was like $10 a day, living off of that, and it kind of gave me this true appreciation of the world out there. And always I was noticing how things were done differently, and more than anything, the interaction in a hostel was something really cool. You just met all these different people. So I just sort of came away, as we all do when we travel, with a real love of that sort of ability to meet perfect strangers and suddenly be friends the next day. Anyway, traveling doesn't pay the bills, so I had to come to London at some point. I'm lucky enough to have a British passport as well as an Australian one. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I was 26 and I had these degrees, and I got into digital media and creative agencies. So I started out in a social media agency. At the time you couldn't place paid ads on Facebook or Twitter, and we actually worked on the Nokia account, so worked on Symbian and app store stuff there. It's a totally different world of what mobile is today. And anyway, I went back to Australia for a while, and I kind of had been spending all my time doing what you guys probably describe as more like the UX UI and the front end stuff and the overall management, and I kept on feeling guilty really that I didn't have enough understanding what developers were doing. And I was actually, my partner was a developer for 8 years, so I was lucky enough to kind of learn a bit about that. He was at Google at the end. Anyway, I kind of was like, yeah, but I want to know more, and I was hearing people doing general assembly. So I went and did general assembly, and at the time we studied Backbone. React wasn't kind of like a mainstream thing at that point. So I was like, that's pretty cool. I really enjoy the fact that you can render things on a page a lot faster than, back in the day. I've kind of grown up without internet all the time, right? So we had dial-up for a really long time. So the fact that you can bring up different, versions of things very quickly was really appealing. So I was like, Backbone sounds really cool. And that was it really. And my relationship broke down, and I came back to London and I got into VR, and that was really cool because I was able to take, my understanding of different interactions, etc., and use that in a different medium. But actually, the story of Travltalk did start in 2015, just before I came back to London, just before I'd done general assembly, really. And I did general assembly because I wanted to kind of get more familiar with, what it took to develop. And at the time, it started as a web application, and then it became a mobile application. But before I go on, I just want to talk about, I'm not a back-end software engineer, and by no means did I ever consider myself, technical enough to build my own app, because let's face it, that's a big jump from general assembly to doing that. And my app was actually built in React Native by a development agency, but prior to that it was an Ionic version of the app. But today, I'm proud to say that I do run all of our Travltalk app in-house with my lead developer, Ahmed, who is a legend. He's in Pakistan, and he's worked with us over, the time, but he basically came full-time from the middle of October. He's actually worked in React Native for quite a few years. He had another app called Blanc that he worked for, and, he really is a full-stack engineer. Of course, I couldn't claim that I was standing here and able to do everything myself without him, of course. So just in case you don't know, Travltalk is an application created to join those with a love of travel across the globe, inclusive of all backgrounds, cultures and nationalities, to make the world a smaller place. I think that, let's face it, Boris Johnson is our Prime Minister and we've just Brexited, and we need something out there that actually, seeks to sort of connect people regardless of their backgrounds, and that's something I'm really passionate about. But basically, we're not just an app, we're also a web presence. So a lot of people don't realize that because we have a mobile app, they think that's the sort of extent of the business, but actually we have a really burgeoning web platform, and actually at the moment it's got a WP backend and it's a WordPress site, and I kind of wrapped it up for $100 and then connected the backend. Obviously you can do that very easily, and started to invite people to apply to be contributors. And since I set that up last year, we've published 200 articles and had like over 200 applications to be contributors. We look at all of them, we try and be very objective, and probably have like about 20 live contributors that I talk to at any one time, just roaming the world, telling me where they are. And we let people write their own thing. So I just want to kind of clarify that while we are a React Native mobile app, we're a brand platform. Our name is Travltalk, and basically, together you can have a seamless experience. And we also have a podcast. And very soon, we're working on our Next.js kind of application, which enables us to really move all of our web stuff over to a React framework, and then gives us the ability to actually take what is a mobile application only at the moment and really bring that to what I call mobile web, but also if you're on desktop, the same way that Instagram works, you're able to interact with Instagram in a limited way if you're on desktop. Basically, you'll be able to do the same with Travltalk. Of course, we don't want people to suddenly start using Travltalk on desktop and not mobile. There's obviously a really interesting thing that we can do to make sure that we still encourage people to jump onto the mobile app so they can't chat or create cards on web, but obviously they can view cards, because it's really important that we get more users into our app. And I'm proud to say at the moment we've got 12,000 real users in our app. It's not as many as I would have liked, but we actually had a bumper period in October last year. We went from 7,500 users to basically 12,000 users just in 20 days, and we got a 70p cost per download, which was pretty good. As I said, I'm here to kind of just give you a bit of a background of where Travltalk began, and maybe a lot of you don't know, but it actually began as a Ionic app. So I just wanted to kind of give you a little, I don't know if anyone's used Marvel like recently, because it's quite old now, but basically this is kind of where we were back in the day. And I got these wireframes done by my UX UI team, Spruce Design. I've worked with them since 2015. So they've done all the wireframes and interaction design for me all along, both from the Ionic app and the React Native app. But basically, this was like 2015. I was thinking about a content platform, not a mobile site. And I thought, we may as well just do a mobile app to kind of like raise awareness of the content site. And I look back and I'm like, ha ha ha, like you just do a mobile app. But basically these wireframes were done. And because I decided to come back to London and had a bit of a relationship breakdown actually, it just got pushed by the wayside and I got into VR. So this is actually what Travltalk looked like a very, very long time ago in 2015. Anyway, what came next was actually full wireframes for the Ionic version of the app. So this was kind of like the design, and I really knew what I wanted. I was like, okay, basically I want an app that's very similar to Tinder, because I could see the popularity of Tinder, and I think sometimes developers obviously think very functionally, but when you've kind of worked in creative agencies and media agencies for a really long time, you have to think about end-to-end product management, and I'm just a really big fan of that. And obviously every founder loves Steve Jobs and thinks that they want to be them, but obviously what he did really well is understand what Apple needed in terms of an ecosystem. And we all know that you can't really have one Apple device, you have to have them all. And some people are in favor of that and some people aren't, but the fact of the matter is, if you don't understand what you're doing from day one and how that's going to manifest, you probably aren't going to do so well when it comes to building a product or actually being able to connect with your audience, because your audience and the users are going to use your application in a much different way than you tend to want to develop it. They don't really care what's in it, actually. They care what it looks like and how it performs. So basically, I was very clear. I was like, I want an app that mimics some of the best customer experience of Tinder, but I wanted to center it around the idea that first you could meet people, but also you could help travelers do things like split costs and sell items that they no longer need. I've constantly found myself with a saucepan as I'm leaving a camping site in New Zealand and thinking, I just have to leave this on the side of the road, but it's worth $20. I wish someone would buy it, but no one wanted a saucepan. So my app actually allows you to sell a saucepan. It allows you to split costs if you arrive in Bangkok and you're like, I bet a whole bunch of people got off this plane right now and want to go down to Koh San Road. And you can actually find them. So Uber obviously helps you get in the taxi, but we can actually help you find people to jump in that Uber with who are right there next to you. And obviously meeting, yes, it's a bit like Tinder, but certainly as a solo female traveller, and I've travelled to 80 countries myself with a backpack alone, and I got hairier and hairier along the way. And basically, yeah, just as a solo traveller, people are now using Tinder to connect with people nearby, but I don't really think that that's awesome because, you know, it's just nice to meet someone sometimes with no sexual connotations, especially when you're traveling in a foreign country by yourself. So anyway, I was also seeing like in media the increase, because we did a lot. I worked at OMD UK and my client was Intel, and we had McDonald's, and McDonald's has so much money, they can do all sorts of stuff, right? So we're doing like location-based service stuff, serving people push notifications. This is like in 2013, right? Wow. And I was like, okay, this solo-mo thing, I'm on it. I can see the future. So anyway, I really wanted to do an app that had location services, because I knew that when people are moving around the world, obviously people have their phone with them, and I wasn't lucky enough to travel with a phone when I first started, and it was really annoying. And then suddenly started traveling with a phone, and I'm like, wow, I can open this phone and I can get around. You know, I can get an Uber in a foreign country. I can also find where I'm going. So I knew location services were very important, and I also know how much people just want to chat, but obviously they need to meet each other first. We don't want Tinder. So, you know, basically that was how this came about. So suddenly, you know, you can see the first workings, if you like, of my app. It is all wired up, but I'm not going to cause you too much with that. I'm going to do this again because it was a mess. Okay, so basically what happened is the designs were done in May 2017, but at the time I got a job at HTC Vive as the marketing director for EMEA. And they had a rule that I wasn't allowed to have another business. So I kind of thought, well, that's okay, because this might not work out. And basically, the guys that did the wireframes, I coded the first version of an Ionic app. I sort of just did a tutorial and saved myself about $10,000. But they agreed that they would basically go from the wireframes to building the Ionic app by product managing the outsourcing of that to iTelesoft in India. And basically, we were just playing on delivery. And so I got to the end of December, and actually I left Vive, and it just so happened that the Ionic version of the app was out in the App Store. Now you might think, wow, that was a pretty easy ride, and looking back it was actually. And you know, Spruce were fantastic. They took me through everything. I added everything. It was a really simple app at that stage. It didn't really have much in it. And that was kind of the problem for me. I was sort of like, well, I love the idea that Ionic works for two platforms with one code base. Like, that's phenomenal. But I was noticing when I was doing all the testing and stuff that it was a bit buggy on the front end, and it was a bit like there was lag, and it just wasn't like that nice user bouncy experience. And I sort of looked into it a bit more, and I also thought the brand needed a bit of a refresh, because you only get one chance, you know, when you have an idea, and basically you want to make it work. And if you can't future-proof yourself, someone will come in over the top. So I sort of had a look around, and my UX UI team said, have you heard of React Native? And this is the beginning of 2018. It was still in its infancy. And he said, why don't you have a look at it with the redesign? Because what we could do is we could do a brand redesign, but we could do it in a way that is really conducive for React Native. And I read up about it, and I was like, oh my God, like the state changes are incredible. And apologies if I do get the terminology wrong. I'm across a lot of things. I'm actually across about 75 pieces of tech as admin. For myself, and obviously Ahmed helps. But basically, what really appealed to me, ironically, for anyone who understands, is the lightweight middleware. And I knew of this thing called Redux, and I was like, oh my God, so you don't have to make all these server calls. That's amazing, because if you think about it, when you're swiping, you don't really want to interact necessarily with that card or that person until you decide to. So why would you want, you know, to constantly make these calls? So wow, this Redux thing looks really interesting. And then, you know, as I said, whatever Instagram does, I'm not going to lie, I sort of take their lead because they have a lot of money. So they tend to invest a fair bit. And we all know that React Native comes from Facebook. So when I heard that framework was from Facebook, I thought, well, I'm willing to bet on that. And definitely all the developers at the time were pretty excited about it. I didn't know much about it, but what I did do, just to really understand it better, is I did a little React Native app of my own called Manager on Unity. Like end to end, had a bit of fun, and boom, I was using Expo and everything. It was literally a toy app. I mean, it took 6 hours to do, and I thought, I knew that I didn't know anything about mobile development, but I took it to my new developers to show them that I had real enthusiasm and a real desire to get involved in what I wanted to do. And finally, at the end of the day, I'm not saying it's cheap to build in React Native. You guys cost a lot. But basically, it's actually really cheap to run. So our app was built and completed in June 2018, and it went out into the App Store. So it's been out there for a year and a half. And after it was built, I actually left the original team that built it and went to another agency, eventually went in-house. And in the end, we all know that the person who developed the app originally tends to sort of understand the code base. Developers don't like picking up other people's work. So I sort of thought, look, I got £150,000 after I left the agency. And I suddenly had this money in my bank account as a sole founder. You get 150K in a bank account, only you own. And you're like, holy fuck. And I was like, wow, I actually can afford to have a real dev team. And there was a lot of modifications I wanted to do to the MVP. It was, as I said, it was a simple app, but it was working pretty well. And we had the beginnings of some tracking and analytics I wanted, like Mixpanel, but I'd also learned about Branch. And I was like, holy shit, the deep linking technology is amazing. And we all know Slack. It's pretty cool, like magic link. And I was like, that's what I want. I want users to be able to sign up that way. So basically I realized that it was really cheap to run because suddenly I had this MVP and it was all done and it cost me nothing to keep it going, right? Like, unless you're developing new things, it costs $0 to run. So that's why I actually chose React Native. And it's a really big deal because I had a whole app out in both app stores, both the Google Play and Apple Store in Ionic that looks exactly the same, or not looks, but was designed, the interaction was designed exactly the same way. Obviously what was inside was different, and that's why I chose React Native. Now, I sort of just gone on and on about the backstory, but maybe you want to know what Travltalk does. It's a really simple app, and that was the idea from the beginning. It's just got a really simple data schema. You basically have a user. A user can have create a card. The user also has a profile. Obviously, we have a location. You can search by location. You can chat. And finally, we have this extra feature where you can plan and book. Obviously, I really wanted to develop out the planning and the booking side of things, but because of a few things that happened along the way, we didn't get there. So we're a bit behind in certain features, certainly about onboarding and stuff like that. But we're in a really exciting place. And as I said, it was modeled on the popularity of swiping. And finally, look, investors don't like to hear that you've got an app that's not making any money. And I knew that from my days in media. It's all about the conversion. And if you can get to that fastest cost per click, then obviously you have a customer. So in-app purchase was becoming really popular. One of my best friend's husbands, he's a mobile gamer. He did Bike Baron, if anyone knows. But basically, they were making a lot of money with in-app purchases. I mean, the amount of money people pay for those things is incredible. But I thought, why don't we make it functional? So actually, Travltalk is free to download in your current country, and you can use it to change cities within that country. But if you do want to see cards from cities before you land and chat to people before you're there, then it's a 99p in-app subscription process. And it's just with a couple of taps, as we know, it's pretty easy. And that's how I get a customer. And obviously, depending on who hears that, that might sound like, what? But I've found recently that certainly we call them Gen Z, snowflakes, who else? But they like to pay for things they value. And I believe that Travltalk is a useful app, and actually people will pay for something that they find useful. So basically I made this video back in February last year because I understand how to work with animators. The whole thing cost me £1,000 to make. We have a lot of assets that we reuse, obviously, and all the design, etc., was kind of like my vision and leading it with the React Native developers. So that's kind of how it works. And then I think I mentioned the wireframes actually of the new app. So we have quite a busy InVision board here, but this was, I sort of mentioned that we did some new wireframes after the Ionic version, and this is what basically I took to my developers when I was interviewing them and said, here's the Ionic version of the app, and here are all the wireframes that I've done in the redesign of the brand with my UX UI team, Spruce. So basically I was looking for React Native developers that could take my product and follow these design instructions. And I was lucky enough to find one that could for my budget. And obviously, I'm not going to pretend that the tech inside my app isn't amazing. It really is. And I learned a lot about it recently, especially the back end. And basically, in case you wonder what it's sort of made up of, because I'm very, very aware that this is maybe not a technical enough talk for people at the React Native meetup, but I hope this is the first in many I can give, so I'm just really excited to be part of this audience. But basically, we have a Travltalk API, which is connected via Apollo server. We have a Travltalk app client, which is naturally built in React Native, and we're slowly building out our Travltalk web. We have an admin panel for our CMS, and as I said, we're starting to develop out the mobile web version. We've also just recently finished our Travltalk design manager storybook. I learned a little bit more about the relationship between storybook node and obviously how it all comes together and gets applied to your project, and Google Cloud Platform, which I've also recently found out more about. And as I said, we use InVision for UX UI, and obviously a lot of Photoshop and InDesign, which I became an expert in by accident. And then, from a back-end perspective, Cloudflare's an awesome hosting platform for domains. Don't use GoDaddy. And now.sh, AWS database. We've been with that since I left the agency the first time around sort of August. And Firebase, which I found out is a really nice tool, and GraphQL, which I think Abby's going to talk a bit more about. And as I said, on web at the moment, we've got a WP Engine backend still for our WordPress site. We use Airtable. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, for all of our editorial planning, and sort of have an input on our website where people can sign up. We have an automated process where people get an email and then we consider them. We use MailChimp and Zapier. So that was kind of our makeshift free CRM that cost us nothing. And actually, on the tracking and analytics front, so when you work in a media agency, it's all about the tracking and analytics. One of my clients used to be Peugeot, and they wanted to know everything: how many downloads, what they did, what you did, blah, blah, blah. And this is like 2013, and there just wasn't any tracking on mobile. It was a bit horrific, really. You'd spend clients' money, and you'd be like, yeah, we can't really tell you what happened. We just think it did really well. And they're like, what? Like, there's no tracking on mobile yet. And obviously, since I left in 2013, and when I actually came back in sort of 2018, it had changed quite a lot. Now, I think it was introduced that Adjust is sponsoring tonight, and I just want to explain to you, why I made the decisions I did about the tracking and analytics. So in-app, we have Mixpanel. I didn't really know much about Firebase and GraphQL Manager until very recently, but I really pushed to get Mixpanel integrated, and we did a proper integration of that in January 2019. It cost me $7,500 a year. And that means that you can obviously access a lot of information about your data. Then, as I mentioned, I wanted to go with Branch for deep linking, and we did set it up and we had it fully operational. I was also an enterprise client for Branch, and it did some really cool things. I think a lot of people using mobile have used Branch. And then I sort of was like, yeah, but actually I want a kind of dashboard that I can see, and AppsFire was quite popular, so I put in AppsFire, and I wasn't really happy with that. And then I saw these lovely guys at Adjust. I can't tell you enough how nice these people are, and that really makes a huge difference. But also, their product is simple and it's engineered really well. They'll say themselves they're German by design, right? And basically, it's a really interesting product. It does media attribution. For those of you that don't know, if you're going to spend a whole bunch of money online, you really want to understand where it goes. I use Google Ads Manager and Facebook Business, but actually having to use Apple Search and all those other platforms is a bit confusing when you're just trying to, you want to understand who your audience is, but you also want to retarget them. And it is important, if you can, to understand their device IDs, because that helps you in the longer run. So actually, Adjust is a really great platform for media attribution analytics, but also in fraud prevention. One of the things that certainly startups get in trouble for if they want to try and prove their metrics by just saying, look at all the installs we got. Well, if they don't convert to signups, then you're not really doing very well. And also there could be a lot of fake installs. So I'm really proud to say we have a 60% install to sign up rate for Travltalk. And it's really cool to see the interactions when we do run media. We haven't been able to run it since October, unfortunately, because budget-wise we got cleaned out. But it's just fascinating, because when you actually pay a bit of money, you see that happen, and then you can sort of get this full visibility. It helps you better understand your customers. And that's really why I was so passionate about having the best-in-class tracking and analytics within my app, because I really cared about my users. I wanted to understand what they were doing. I wanted to understand what they liked, what they didn't like. And look, a lot of people go over the top with user testing because you can ask people till you're blue in the face, but this started in 2015 for me, and I wouldn't stop talking about it. So I can tell you I spent pretty much every day of my life user testing until I ended up, pretty much in the position I am now. So it's really the quantitative analytics that are most interesting to some degree, because once you start to get those big numbers, and obviously we shouldn't be looking at people individually because it shouldn't really be giving you the insight you want. So finally, I just want to show you the Travltalk Design System Manager that we built out. So really proud, bit by bit, we've just got, as I said, we're about to do the web design. So this is what that's looking like. So I had that up before. So yeah, this is something that we're going to be launching. I was hoping it would be in the next sort of week or so, but now that I better understand how we can structure our schema for this, we're going to pause a little bit and make sure that we can do that to the best of our ability. But as you can see, sort of in our design system manager, we have all the sorts of components, sponsor cards, suggestion cards, images. So it just makes everything super easy for future development. And again, that was my UX UI team, Spruce. They're pretty good front end developers, and they're the ones, as I said, that suggested React to me. So they've always been like really good. Every time I was sort of like, yeah, we need this, and that's what I want. Didn't have to kind of give them too many complicated briefs. They just kind of came back, and we worked really well together. So yeah, that's kind of a bit of a long way of showing you all sorts of stuff. But just want to say, what next? As I mentioned, we've got the web launch for the content, and then we're following up with the mobile web interface. That's kind of what it's going to look like. As I said, we mimic Instagram in many ways, because if you go to Instagram, you can view photos, but you can't actually upload a photo or start a chat. So what we do, and this is obviously investors don't want to hear that you're just going to spend all your money on paid media and get users that way. You have to worry about organic growth, and I've always worried about that for day one, and that's why I sort of created the content platform and the podcast, because that kind of becomes content fuel. People love talking about traveling, but obviously if I can push them on website to a little bit of a taster of our app, and you can see cards, you can search by location, you can see what's nearby, then obviously what you might do is think, oh, I want to talk to Alice, or I can save that card, you can save that on the web version, but if you actually wanted to chat to Alice, you would have a prompt to chat. Obviously if you're on mobile web, that would be pretty easy. If you're not on mobile web, you have to think a little bit about how we kind of create that experience, but that's really exciting. And basically that's all. So that we hope the content and the mobile web interface can come out, within the next month or so. It's a bit budget dependent, but actually I'm really confident now with Ahmed. We're doing a really great job together, spending quite a few hours a day doing bits and pieces because it's just the two of us. And yeah, I've discovered a whole new world of Apollo, and I'm really excited about that because I actually did pure mathematics and statistics at university, and I just love what you can do with data. And to discover what I can do is pretty exciting. And finally, what we need to do, because our app was left in an interesting state, we didn't have any automated testing or detox testing or bug reporting. So unfortunately, it's a bit silly, but I guess we didn't have the best testing set up, to my knowledge anyway. So I just really want to get better at that. I just want to make sure that, now that we have these tools, we can do as much as possible on the user testing, analysis, analytics front, because that's kind of why I did it in the first place. It's a pretty big risk to quit a well-paid job and obviously just go hell for leather on a mobile app. I work 16 hours a day. I don't have much of a life, but, I got to travel all that time. So I thought it's a fair trade-off. I'll build an app for the world that enables everyone else to travel. But basically, I just want to make sure that we can really understand how to use Graph Manager and really sort of, God, that thing's amazing. Anyway, and finally, if you do download our app, you'll probably see that we could definitely do a lot of things better when it comes to onboarding, making it a bit better experience. I know that there are so many things that we could do. I also know that I'm far from perfect, and we're lucky to still be standing, and I'm really proud of what we have. But, what I really love to say is that I am here to stay in the React Native community, and I can't wait to do some more coding. Really proud of how much better I got at it lately. But I really want this to be a bit of a community project. Like, I've learned so much through this, and it's fun, actually. It's a whole bunch of tech, and when you get to see like the back end of 75 different platforms, you learn a lot. And I've always been quite passionate about helping younger people who are on their way up grow, because I guess people helped me a lot, and I was always grateful to them. And I think it's very rare that you get the privilege of seeing an end-to-end product, because usually as developers you get hired to work on one particular thing, and that means you see that in a silo, but you don't actually see what it takes to bring it all together, and it's a lot of work. And also how that you can sort of use that knowledge to think of new things. So basically, I just want to invite anyone out there in the React Native community or React.js to get in touch. I'm always open to new ideas. I really want to share our learnings, maybe even make some of this stuff open source. I don't know the rules there yet, so I can't really say too much, but I know that certain things can be open source and certain things you might want to keep private. But for me, what makes me happy is the idea that this application can breathe life and be out there in the world and be used by the very people that I designed it for, these awesome travelers, like-minded people. But more importantly, it was just a little bit of a school project once upon a time, because I thought, hey, I've done a general assembly course and I'm working in these companies and I'm being paid big money to talk about doing all this stuff for other brands, and I just want to do that for myself. And really I did that with the desire of being a product manager for my own company, my own brand, and getting closer to the tech. And basically I've had the chance to do it, and I'd love anyone else out there who has an interest. Maybe we can do some hackathons, maybe we can catch up a bit, but please get in touch. And I get hundreds and hundreds of emails every day right now. Do you want this? Do you need a developer? Do you need that? But what I care most about is just people really interested in learning and sharing, and that's what community is about, right? So hope I didn't bore you all to death. Thank you for listening, and yeah, that's the story of Travltalk.